I was standing in my kitchen, coffee mug halfway to my lips, when my mother's voice came through the phone like ice water. "Kevin, your father and I have decided. You need to sign over the deed to your house to Troy. It's only fair." Fair? I froze. This was my $600,000 house, the one I bought with my own money, after working 70-hour weeks for 8 years. "If you refuse," she continued, her tone sharpening, "we've already contacted our attorney. We're prepared to sue you." The mug nearly slipped from my hand. My own parents were threatening legal action against me. My mother wasn't finished. Her voice kept pouring through the speaker, each word more absurd than the last. "Troy lost his job 6 months ago, Kevin. His wife left him. He's living in our basement. You have more than enough. You don't even have children. You can afford to help your brother." I set the mug down carefully on the granite countertop I'd saved 2 years to afford. My hands were shaking. "Mom, I worked for this house. I sacrificed everything. I worked 70-hour weeks. I skipped vacations. I ate ramen for dinner most nights in my 20s so I could save. This house is mine. Family helps family," she said, as if that explained everything. As if those 4 words erased 8 years of my life. Then my father's voice came on the line. Cold, authoritative. The voice he used when he wanted to end a discussion before it started. "Kevin, we've already drafted a letter of intent. Our attorney will be filing paperwork within 48 hours. We're claiming that we provided substantial financial support to you throughout your 20s, and therefore we're entitled to a stake in any assets you acquired during that period." My stomach dropped. "That's a lie. You never gave me a dime after I turned 22. That's your word against ours," my father said. "And we have documentation." The call ended. I stood there in my kitchen, the morning sunlight streaming through the windows I'd personally chosen, illuminating the hardwood floors I'd agonized over, and I felt something crack inside my chest. I scrolled through my contacts with trembling fingers and found Douglas Harper's number. Douglas was my real estate attorney, a sharp man in his 50s who'd handled my home purchase 2 years ago. He was meticulous, practical, and intimidatingly intelligent. If anyone could help me, it was him. He answered on the second ring. "Kevin. Good morning. What can I do for you?" I explained everything. The demand, the threat, the claim about financial support that never existed. My voice kept breaking. I heard how pathetic I sounded, but I couldn't stop the words from tumbling out. There was a pause on the line. Then Douglas burst out laughing. It wasn't a polite chuckle. It was genuine, hearty laughter that went on for several seconds. "Kevin," he finally said, still chuckling, "they're threatening to sue you for a house you purchased entirely with your own documented income? A house they have zero legal claim to?" He laughed again. "This is the most frivolous thing I've heard in 20 years of practice." Something shifted inside me. The panic began to recede, replaced by a warm surge of vindication. Douglas explained it simply. Without proof of financial contribution, co-signing, or any legal agreement, your parents have absolutely no standing. None. If they actually file this lawsuit, it'll be dismissed immediately. Their attorney could face sanctions for filing a baseless claim. "Kevin, you have nothing to worry about. So what should I do? I'll draft a cease and desist letter. We'll send it certified mail. It'll outline the legal reality and warn them of the consequences if they proceed. Trust me, once their attorney sees it, they'll advise your parents to drop this nonsense." I thanked him and hung up. For the first time since my mother's call, I felt powerful. I felt in control. That evening, I was making dinner when the doorbell rang. A courier stood on my porch holding a certified letter. I signed for it, closed the door, and opened the envelope. My hands started shaking again. It wasn't a lawsuit about the house. It was something far worse. My parents had filed a claim for financial elder abuse. They were accusing me of manipulating them into giving me $50,000 5 years ago under false pretenses. They wanted it back, with interest, totaling $78,000. Attached were bank statements, transaction records, dates, amounts, account numbers, transfers from their account to mine. $50,000, spread across 8 months, 5 years ago. I stared at the documents. They looked real. They looked legitimate, but they were completely fabricated. I had never received a single dollar. My parents weren't just entitled. They weren't just greedy. They were willing to commit fraud to destroy me. I was back in Douglas's office at 8:30 the next morning. I'd barely slept. The fabricated documents were spread across his mahogany desk, and Douglas's expression had shifted from amused confidence to something much darker. He studied each page carefully, his reading glasses perched on his nose. "These look convincing at first glance," he said quietly. "The formatting is correct. The account numbers appear legitimate. They've put real effort into this. But they're fake," I said. "I never received any of this money." "I believe you. But here's the problem, Kevin. Disproving these documents will require forensic accounting. We'll need to subpoena the actual bank records from both institutions, verify the account histories, and potentially hire an expert witness to testify about document manipulation. This process could take months and cost you $20,000 to $30,000. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. $30,000? Just to prove something that never happened? That's how fraud works, Douglas said grimly. The liar forces the victim to spend resources proving the truth. It's a weapon. I slumped in the chair. 2 years ago, I had over $100,000 in savings. A comfortable cushion, but I'd put $60,000 down on the house, spent another $20,000 on furniture and renovations, and my savings had dwindled to about $45,000. $30,000 in legal fees would gut me. "There's more," I said. I pulled out my own bank records, the real ones from 5 years ago. I didn't take money from them. I gave money to them. $3,000 for my father's car repair when his transmission failed. $4,000 for my mother's medical bills when their insurance lapsed. I have the receipts. The transfer records. Douglas examined them. "This is good. This shows a pattern contrary to their claims. But it's still circumstantial. We need the forensic bank analysis to definitively prove their documents are forged." He advised me to file a countersuit for defamation and fraud. I agreed. What choice did I have? I left his office feeling hollowed out. That evening, my phone rang. Troy's name appeared on the screen. My younger brother, 28 years old, chronically underemployed, always looking for shortcuts. I almost didn't answer. "What do you want, Troy?" "Just wanted to see how you're doing, big brother." His voice had a smugness to it that made my skin crawl. "You know exactly how I'm doing. You helped them, didn't you?" He laughed. "Yeah, I did. Mom and Dad needed help creating the documents. I'm pretty good with Photoshop, you know. Image manipulation, PDF editing. It's not that hard once you understand the layers." I couldn't breathe. "You're admitting to fraud. I'm admitting to helping my parents get what they deserve. You always had everything handed to you, Kevin. The good grades, the scholarship, the engineering degree. Mom and Dad had to take out loans for my college. $40,000 in loans. You got a free ride. It's time you paid us back for their sacrifice. I earned that scholarship. I studied every night. I worked my tail off. Whatever helps you sleep at night," Troy said. "Just know that when this goes to court, I'll be testifying that I personally witnessed you receiving that money. I was there. I saw the transactions. My word against yours." The line went dead. I sat on my couch, staring at the wall, trying to process what had just happened. My entire family had united against me. Not just my parents. My brother was actively participating in the fraud, creating false evidence, and planning to perjure himself in court. I called Douglas and told him about Troy's confession. He said it was useful but not enough. Troy would just deny saying it. It was my word against his. I barely slept that night. The next morning, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my employer, the civil engineering firm where I'd worked for 9 years. It was Sandra from Human Resources. "Kevin, we need you to come in today." "Something's come up." My stomach nodded. "What is it?" "I'd rather discuss it in person." An hour later, I sat in a sterile conference room across from Sandra and my boss, Gerald. Gerald was a stern man in his late 50s, meticulous and old school. He valued reputation above everything. Sandra slid a piece of paper across the table. "We received an anonymous complaint yesterday. It alleges that you've been embezzling company funds and living beyond your means. The complaint specifically mentions your house and questions how you could afford a $600,000 property on your salary." The room spun. "That's insane. I saved for 8 years. I have documentation for every dollar." "We're not accusing you of anything," Sandra said carefully. "But we're required to investigate all complaints of this nature. We'll be conducting an internal audit of your project budgets, expense reports, and financial activities over the past 5 years." Gerald leaned forward. "Kevin, I'm disappointed. I expected better from you. I didn't do anything wrong. Then the investigation will clear you," he said. "But until it does, you're on administrative leave. Effective immediately." I walked out of that building in a daze. My family had just attacked my career. They weren't satisfied with trying to take my house. They wanted to destroy my livelihood, my reputation, everything I'd built. I was now fighting a war on 2 fronts. And I was losing. Administrative leave is a strange kind of purgatory. You're not fired, but you're not working. You're in limbo, waiting while other people decide your fate. For 2 weeks, I sat in my house, the house I'd fought so hard for, and watched my life unravel. The internal investigation was thorough. Forensic accountants combed through 5 years of my work expenses, project budgets, vendor contracts, and financial records. Every receipt, every invoice, every reimbursement request. My boss, Gerald, made it clear he took the allegations seriously. The firm's reputation was at stake. My coworkers started avoiding me. I'd get texts from Amanda, my closest colleague, giving me updates. People were talking in the break room. Speculation was spreading. Some people thought I might actually be guilty. After all, why else would there be an investigation? Meanwhile, Douglas was working on the countersuit, but the forensic bank analysis was painfully slow. The bank that held my old account from 5 years ago had been acquired by a larger institution. Retrieving archived records required special requests, administrative approvals, and processing time. Douglas estimated 6 to 8 weeks before we'd have definitive proof. 6 to 8 weeks. 2 months while my life burned down around me. My parents escalated. They started contacting extended family members. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. They spun a story about their ungrateful son who stole from them and now refused to make things right. They posted vague messages on social media about betrayal and family loyalty. Nothing specific enough to be actionable, but enough to poison the well. My cousin Lisa called me one afternoon. She was crying. "Kevin, how could you do this to them? They're your parents. They gave you everything." "Lisa, it's not true. They're lying. Why would they lie about something like this? They're devastated. Your mom can barely function. She's on medication for anxiety." I tried to explain the situation, but Lisa had already made up her mind. "I think you need to take a hard look at yourself," she said, and hung up. One by one, family members turned against me. Some called to yell. Others just stopped responding to my messages. My uncle posted something on social media about how blood is thicker than water, clearly directed at me. The comments section filled with relatives agreeing, condemning me without ever hearing my side. The isolation was suffocating. Then came my grandmother's 86th birthday party. My father's mother, a woman I'd always been close to. I debated whether to attend, but I decided I had to try. Maybe I could talk to people face to face, explain what was really happening. I walked into the community center, where the party was being held. The room went quiet. Conversations stopped. People stared. My uncle, my father's brother, stood up. He was a large man, with a booming voice. "Kevin, you're not welcome here. I just want to talk to Grandma. She doesn't want to see you." I looked across the room. My grandmother sat at the head table, surrounded by family. She wouldn't look at me. Her face was turned away, deliberately avoiding my gaze. My mother was there, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, playing the grieving victim. My father sat beside her, his expression wounded and sorrowful. They'd perfected their roles. "Please," I said. "Just let me explain." "Explain what?" My uncle said. "How you stole from your own parents. How you're trying to use legal tricks to avoid paying them back. We know what kind of person you are, Kevin. Now leave before I call security." The entire room was watching, judging. I saw it in their faces. They believed my parents. They believed I was the villain. I left without another word. I sat in my car in the parking lot and couldn't stop shaking. I'd lost my family. All of them. 2 days later, the workplace investigation concluded. Sandra called me into another conference room meeting. Gerald was there, along with the head of HR and a company attorney, Kevin. The investigation found no evidence of embezzlement. Sandra said. Relief flooded through me. Finally, something going right. However, the attorney continued, "We did find an irregularity. 3 years ago, you approved a vendor contract for Dalton Engineering Solutions. Our records show that company was partially owned by a former college friend of yours, Marcus Dalton. You didn't disclose this relationship when approving the contract." I blinked. "Marcus? We were in the same study group freshman year. I didn't even know he owned part of that company. We haven't spoken in years. Nevertheless, it violated company policy regarding conflicts of interest. Even unintentional violations are taken seriously." Gerald leaned forward. "Kevin, we're offering you a choice. You can resign quietly, and we'll provide a neutral reference for future employment. Or we can formally terminate you, and the conflict of interest violation will be noted in your personnel file. Either way, your employment with this firm is ending." I stared at him. "You're firing me because of a technicality? After 9 years? "We're giving you the option to resign," the attorney corrected. "That's not an option. That's a threat." Sandra pushed a resignation letter across the table. "We need your decision today." I looked at the letter. At the 3 people watching me with professional detachment. I thought about fighting it. But what would that accomplish? More legal fees I couldn't afford. More time wasted. And the job was gone regardless. I signed the letter, walking out of that building for the last time. Carrying a small box with my desk belongings, I felt completely defeated. My parents had successfully destroyed my career. I had no income, mounting legal bills, and a reputation in ruins. I'd spent 8 years building a life. It had taken my family 2 months to tear it all down. Losing your job at 32 years old is terrifying in ways I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just the loss of income. It was the loss of identity. I'd been a civil engineer. I'd built things, roads, bridges, infrastructure that mattered. Now I was unemployed, sitting at home, sending out resumes into the void. The job market was brutal. I applied to 17 firms in the first 3 weeks. I got 3 responses. 2 were rejections. 1 was an interview. The interview went well until the hiring manager asked why I'd left my previous position. I tried to explain it carefully, neutrally. There was a policy violation discovered during a routine review. I chose to resign, rather than go through a lengthy dispute process. The hiring manager's expression shifted. I could see the doubt creeping in. The interview ended 10 minutes later. I never heard from them again. Word spreads in professional circles. My industry wasn't that large. People talk. The story of the investigation, the resignation, the alleged family dispute, it all circulated through informal networks. Potential employers would do their research and find the messy situation. Nobody wanted that kind of drama. I finally landed a contract position at a smaller firm. The pay was 40% less than my previous salary. $52,000 a year instead of $90,000. It was enough to cover my mortgage and basic expenses, but barely. And it came with no benefits, no security, no future. Meanwhile, the legal bills kept mounting. Douglas's invoices arrived every 2 weeks. $5,000, $4,000, $7,500. The forensic accounting alone cost $12,000. By the end of the third month, I'd spent $35,000 on legal fees. My savings account, once a source of pride, dwindled to $8,000. I stopped eating out entirely. I canceled subscriptions. I drove less to save on gas. Every dollar mattered. I sat at my kitchen table one night, surrounded by bills and bank statements, doing the math. If the legal battle continued much longer, I'd have to sell the house just to afford the fight, which was exactly what my parents wanted. They were bleeding me dry. And it was working. I felt trapped, cornered, helpless. Then Douglas called with good news. "Kevin, we got the bank records, all of them, from both your old account and your parents' account. And no transfers occurred. Not one. The documents your parents submitted are complete fabrications. We have definitive proof of fraud. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope. So we can prove they lied. Absolutely. I'm confident we can now pursue criminal charges against your parents and Troy. Fraud, forgery, making false statements in legal documents. This is serious, Kevin. They could face jail time. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt exhausted. What happens next? We file an amended countersuit with this evidence. We also recommend going to the police and filing a criminal complaint. The district attorney's office will likely take the case given the strength of the evidence. And my legal fees? The money I've already spent? Douglas paused. We'll seek full reimbursement as part of the judgment. But Kevin, I need to be honest with you. Your parents filed for bankruptcy protection last week. The hope evaporated. What does that mean? It means even if we win the countersuit and get a judgment for damages, collecting that money will be nearly impossible. Bankruptcy shields them from most financial consequences. We can prove they committed fraud. We can potentially send them to jail, but you'll likely never recover your legal costs. I hung up and stared at the ceiling. They'd planned this. Filed bankruptcy strategically to protect themselves. They had nothing to lose and everything to gain. Even if I won, I'd lose. I spent the next week in a fog. I went to my contract job, did my work mechanically, came home, and sat in silence. The house felt like a mausoleum, a monument to wasted effort. One Saturday afternoon, I was cleaning out the garage, trying to keep busy, when I found an old box of belongings from when I'd moved out of my parents' house 10 years ago. Photos, old school papers, random keepsakes I'd never bothered to sort through. At the bottom of the box was a manila folder. Inside were documents. I almost tossed it aside, but something made me look closer. It was a copy of my parents' will, dated 8 years ago. I remembered them giving me a copy when they first drafted it, saying both Troy and I should know their wishes. The will was straightforward. Everything split equally between Troy and me. The house they lived in, worth about $300,000. Their savings, their retirement accounts, everything divided 50-50. But beneath that will was another document, a revised will, dated 2 years ago, just a few months after I'd bought my house. I read it once, then again, then a third time, my hands starting to shake. In the revised will, Troy inherited everything. The house, the savings, the retirement accounts, all of it. Kevin's portion, nothing. Zero. Attached to the will was a handwritten note in my father's writing. I recognized his cramped, angular script. Kevin doesn't need our help. He's always been self-sufficient. Troy needs us more. This is the right decision. I sat on the concrete garage floor, surrounded by old boxes and dust, and understood everything. This lawsuit was never about money. It was never about the $50,000 they claimed I stole. It was about punishing me for being successful, for not needing them, for building a life on my own. My father resented my independence. My mother resented that I didn't need her approval, and they decided to redirect the family's wealth entirely to Troy, the son who'd always needed them, who'd always failed, who'd always come back for help. I'd been written out of their lives long before this lawsuit started. The fraud was just the weapon they chose to destroy me with. I called Douglas and told him about the wills. He was silent for a long moment. Kevin, this shows premeditation. It demonstrates a pattern of bias and targeted animosity. Combined with the fraud, this paints a picture of deliberate malice. I think we need to go to the police now. This isn't just a civil matter anymore. That night, I sat in my house and made a decision. These were still my parents, the people who raised me. Part of me wanted to walk away, let it go, move on with my life. But they'd shown me no mercy. They'd tried to destroy my career, my finances, my reputation. They'd committed crimes. And they'd done it all because they resented my success. I wasn't going to let them win. The next morning, I went to the police station and filed a criminal complaint. The detective assigned to my case was a woman named Angela Rodriguez. She was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of calm intensity that made you feel like she never missed a detail. We met in a small interview room at the police station. I laid out everything: the fabricated bank documents, the fraud claim, Troy's admission that he'd helped create the fake evidence, the bankruptcy filing, the revised will, showing their bias. Douglas had prepared a comprehensive evidence packet, and I watched Detective Rodriguez go through it page by page. She took notes, asked clarifying questions, and showed no emotion until she reached the forged bank statements. Then her jaw tightened. "This is textbook fraud," she said. "Multiple counts. Your brother's involvement makes it conspiracy. And if they submitted these documents in legal proceedings, that's perjury. Can you do anything?" I asked. "I'm going to interview your brother first." People who participate in fraud schemes often break under pressure, especially when they realize they're facing felony charges. Troy won't break. He hates me. Detective Rodriguez looked up from the documents. "People who hate you rarely want to go to prison for you. Let me talk to him." 3 days later, she called me. "You need to come to the station." I drove there with my stomach in knots. Detective Rodriguez met me in the lobby and walked me back to the interview room. On the table was a written statement, 3 pages long, signed by Troy. "Your brother talked," she said simply. "He admitted everything." I picked up the statement and read. Troy had confessed to helping create the fake documents using photo editing software. He'd admitted that our parents had orchestrated the entire scheme. He detailed how our father had researched what fake bank statements should look like, how our mother had provided the account information, and how he'd spent 2 weeks creating convincing forgeries. But there was more. Troy revealed something I hadn't known. Our father had a gambling problem. He'd been going to a casino 3 hours away, twice a month, for the past 2 years. He'd lost $60,000. The debt was crushing them. That's why they'd filed bankruptcy. And that's why they'd targeted me. They needed money desperately. And they'd decided to extract it from me by any means necessary. The goal was either to force me to give up the house and split the proceeds, or to drain me financially fighting them until I had to sell anyway. It was calculated, premeditated. A deliberate plan to destroy their own son for money. I set the statement down. My hands were shaking. What happens now? I'm bringing charges against all three of them. Your parents will be charged with fraud, conspiracy, forgery, and making false statements in legal proceedings. Your brother will be charged as an accomplice. The district attorney has already reviewed the evidence. We're moving forward. Douglas used Troy's statement to file an amended countersuit. This time, we weren't just seeking to dismiss their fraudulent claims. We were demanding full reimbursement of all legal fees, plus punitive damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress. The total, $112,000. 2 weeks later, a local news outlet picked up the story. Someone had leaked it, probably from the courthouse. The headline read, "Son sues parents after fraudulent lawsuit over house." The article laid out the basic facts, the fabricated documents, the investigation, the criminal charges. It didn't name me directly, but anyone who knew me would recognize the story. Public opinion shifted. The comments section online was overwhelmingly in my favor. People were outraged on my behalf. They called my parents manipulative, greedy, evil. They praised me for standing up to them. My extended family started reaching out. Cousin Lisa called, crying, apologizing. "I'm so sorry, Kevin. I didn't know. I should have listened to you." My uncle sent a long email expressing regret. My aunt texted saying she'd never speak to my parents again. One by one, the people who'd shunned me were trying to come back. I didn't respond to most of them. I was too tired. Then Gerald, my former boss, called. "Kevin, I saw the news. I owe you an apology. The company overreacted. We should have stood by you." "Yes, you should have. I'd like to offer you your position back. Full reinstatement, back pay for the months you were gone, and a formal apology letter for your personnel file." I accepted. Not because I forgave him, but because I needed the income and the stability. But something had broken between us. I'd never trust that firm again. The criminal case moved forward. My parents hired a defense attorney, but the evidence was overwhelming. Troy's confession, the forensic bank analysis, the documented pattern of fraud. And then, just as I started to feel like I was regaining control, everything fell apart again. I received a notice in the mail. My parents had filed for a restraining order against me. The petition claimed I'd been harassing them, threatening them, showing up at their house screaming. They submitted evidence, screenshots of text messages allegedly from my number, filled with threats and profanity. A witness statement from a neighbor named Carol Summers, claiming she'd seen me at their house on multiple occasions, shouting, acting aggressively. The restraining order was granted on a temporary basis pending a hearing. I stared at the notice in disbelief. The text messages were fake. I'd never sent them. And I hadn't been to my parents' house in over 4 months, but it didn't matter. The restraining order was in effect. I was legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of my parents. I couldn't attend family events if they were present. I couldn't confront them. I couldn't defend myself in person. And the restraining order made me look like the aggressor, like I was dangerous, unstable. The news outlet ran a follow-up article. Family dispute takes dark turn, son barred. From parents after alleged threats. The comments section turned. People started questioning my version of events. Maybe the parents were telling the truth after all. Maybe Kevin was unhinged. Public opinion wavered. I went from victim to potential villain overnight. I called Douglas, barely holding it together. They're doing it again. They're lying again. And people are believing them. We'll fight the restraining order, Douglas said. We'll prove the text messages are fabricated and the witness is lying. But Kevin, it's going to take time. And more money. I hung up and sat in the dark. Every time I got ahead, my parents found a way to drag me back down. Every victory was temporary. Every step forward led to 2 steps back. I was exhausted, financially drained, emotionally destroyed, and I didn't know if I had the strength to keep fighting. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, I was trapped. I couldn't go near my parents. I couldn't attend my cousin's wedding because they'd be there. I couldn't even drive past their neighborhood without risking arrest. Douglas assured me we'd win the hearing. The text messages were clearly fabricated. Metadata would prove that. The witness statement was suspicious, but proving it would require another court appearance, more legal arguments, more time and money. My savings were down to $3,000. I was back at my old job, but the trust was gone. My coworkers looked at me differently. The news articles had done their damage. I started having panic attacks. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning, heart racing, unable to breathe. I'd sit in the dark wondering how much more I could take. I considered walking away, dropping everything, moving to another state, starting over. But that would mean they won. And I couldn't let that happen. Detective Rodriguez called with bad news. Kevin, the criminal case has hit a snag. Your parents' defense attorney is arguing that without your direct testimony confronting your parents in court, the case is weaker. But the restraining order prevents you from being in the same room with them. That's insane. They created the restraining order to avoid prosecution? It's a clever legal maneuver, she admitted. We're working with the prosecutor to find a workaround, but it's complicating things. Every move I made, my parents countered with something worse. They were always 1 step ahead. It felt like fighting shadows. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Kevin? The voice was frail, elderly. It's your grandmother. I sat up straight. Grandma, I need to see you. Can you come to my apartment? When? Now, if you can. I drove to her assisted living facility, my mind racing. She lived in a modest apartment, in a retirement community, on the south side of town. I hadn't spoken to her since the birthday party. I had no idea what to expect. She answered the door looking smaller than I remembered. 86 years old, thin and fragile. But her eyes were sharp. She gestured me inside. Sit down, Kevin. I sat on her floral couch. She lowered herself into a recliner across from me, moving slowly, her joints clearly aching. I owe you an apology, she said. I believed your parents. I shouldn't have. I should have talked to you first. It's okay, Grandma. No, it's not. Her voice firmed up. 3 months ago, your father came to me asking to borrow $40,000. He said it was for home repairs. The roof needed replacing. I gave it to him. I've always helped my son when he needed it. She paused, her hands trembling slightly. Last week, I found out he used that money to pay off casino debts. He lied to me. He's been gambling for years, and I never knew. I felt a mixture of anger and vindication. I'm sorry, Grandma. That's not why I called you. She reached into a pocket and pulled out her phone. It was a newer model, surprisingly. 2 days ago, I was at their house dropping off some food. Your mother didn't know I was still there. I was in the kitchen when she made a phone call. I heard her talking to someone named Carol. She was coaching her on what to say for the restraining order hearing. My heart started pounding. You heard this? I recorded it. She held up the phone. I figured out how to use the recording app. My friend's grandson showed me. I wanted proof. Before I talked to you, she played the recording. It was tinny, slightly muffled, but clear enough. My mother's voice came through. Carol, just stick to the script. Say you saw Kevin at the house around 9 p.m. on the 15th. Say he was shouting, banging on the door. Say you felt threatened. That's all you need to say. Once the hearing is over, I'll pay you the $500 we agreed on. There was a pause. Then a woman's voice, presumably Carol. And you're sure he can't prove he wasn't there? He can't prove anything. It's your word. You're a neutral witness. They'll believe you. The recording ended. My grandmother looked at me with sad, tired eyes. I'm sorry, Kevin. I should have seen what they were capable of sooner. I could barely speak. Grandma, this recording proves the restraining order was obtained through perjury and witness tampering. This is huge. There's one more thing you should know, she said. I'm the co-signer on their house. When they bought it 20 years ago, your grandfather and I helped with the down payment, and I co-signed the mortgage. When they filed bankruptcy, they didn't disclose my interest in the property. Legally, I have a claim. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm done protecting them. What they're doing to you is evil. I raised your father better than this. I'm ashamed of him. I took the phone and hugged my grandmother carefully, terrified I might hurt her frail frame. Thank you. You have no idea what this means. Go win your life back, she said. I drove straight to Douglas's office. He listened to the recording 3 times, his expression growing more intense with each replay. This is gold, Kevin. This proves the restraining order was obtained through fraud, perjury, witness tampering. Those are serious criminal offenses. We file an emergency motion to dissolve the restraining order immediately. And we add these new charges to the countersuit. He called Detective Rodriguez and played the recording for her. Within an hour, she'd opened a new investigation. That evening, police arrested my parents. Both of them. They were charged with fraud, forgery, perjury, conspiracy, and witness tampering. Troy was arrested as an accomplice to the fraud. The news coverage exploded. The story went from local interest to regional news. Headlines screamed, "Parents arrested for elaborate fraud scheme against son. Gambling debts lead to family betrayal. Elderly grandmother exposes son's lies." I was fully vindicated in the public eye. The comment sections overflowed with support. My extended family reached out en masse, horrified by the depth of the deception. But I felt nothing. No triumph. No satisfaction. Just exhaustion. The next day, Douglas called. Kevin. During the arrest, police executed a search warrant on your parents' house. They found something you need to see. He sent me scanned copies. Journals. 5 years' worth of handwritten journals kept by my father. Page after page of entries. I forced myself to read them. May 3rd. Kevin bought his house today. $600,000. He called to tell us, so proud of himself. I felt sick. How does he have that kind of money? We're drowning in debt, and he's buying mansions. It's not fair. August 17th. Saw Kevin at a family dinner. He talked about his promotion. Everyone congratulated him. I wanted to leave. His success makes me feel like a failure. I'm his father. I should have been more successful than him. Instead, I'm a disappointment. November 9th. I can't stop thinking about Kevin's house. He doesn't deserve it. He had every advantage. Scholarships, intelligence, opportunities. Troy got none of that. Troy struggles. Kevin floats through life effortlessly. I want to bring him down. I want him to suffer like we have. February 2nd. I have a plan. We'll claim he owes us money. We'll fabricate evidence. We'll force him to give up something. Maybe the house. Maybe just enough money to clear our debts. He won't fight us. He's too weak, too naive. Entry after entry. 5 years of resentment, jealousy, rage. My father's handwriting growing more erratic as the entries progressed. The journals were entered as evidence in the criminal case. I read them twice, then closed the files. I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where this nightmare had started, and felt something break inside me. My father never loved me. He resented me, envied me, hated me. All my achievements, everything I'd worked for, every success, it hadn't made him proud. It had made him bitter. The realization hurt worse than the fraud, worse than the legal battle, worse than everything combined. I'd spent my whole life trying to make my parents proud, and my father had spent years wishing I'd fail. I called Douglas. I want them prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. No plea deals. No mercy. Understood, he said quietly. I hung up and stared at the walls of my house. The house that had cost me everything. The house that had revealed who my family really was. And I decided I was done being their victim. The criminal trial moved quickly. With Troy's confession, my grandmother's recording, the forensic evidence, and my father's journals, the prosecution had an overwhelming case. There was no defense. No explanation that would justify what they'd done. 2 weeks before trial, my parents' attorney approached Douglas with a plea deal. They wanted to plead guilty to reduce charges in exchange for lighter sentences. Douglas called me. "What do you want to do?" I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to force them through a trial, make them face every piece of evidence publicly, but another part was just tired. I wanted it over. "What would the sentence be?" I asked. "They'd each get 18 months in prison, 5 years probation, and they'd be required to pay full restitution to you for all legal fees and damages. $112,000. And Troy? Probation, community service, and $15,000 to you." He cooperated. "So the prosecutor is being more lenient." I agreed. Not because I forgave them, but because I wanted to move on with my life. The plea hearing was brief. I sat in the courtroom and watched my parents stand before the judge. They looked smaller than I remembered. My father's shoulders were hunched. My mother's face was drawn and pale. The judge accepted the pleas and handed down the sentences. 18 months in prison for each of them. 5 years probation. Restitution of $112,000 to me, payable immediately upon release, and then in monthly installments. Troy got 3 years probation and 300 hours of community service, plus his $15,000 restitution. The restraining order was dissolved. My record was cleared. The news coverage declared me vindicated. But standing outside the courthouse afterward, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. Douglas shook my hand. "It's over, Kevin. You won." "Did I?" I asked. "I spent $40,000 defending myself. I lost months of my life. My career was damaged. My reputation took hits. My family is destroyed. What exactly did I win?" Douglas looked at me seriously. "You won the truth. And sometimes that's all there is." My grandmother called that evening. She was revising her will. Everything she had, her savings, her portion of my parents' house, all of it was going to me. She was explicitly disinheriting my father for fraud and betrayal of family trust. "You don't have to do that, Grandma," I said. "Yes, I do. You're the only one in this family who deserves it." Over the following months, life slowly returned to normal. My employer gave me a promotion, partly as an apology, partly because I'd earned it. My reputation in the industry was restored once the full story came out. Colleagues who'd avoided me started reaching out, embarrassed by their assumptions. Extended family members apologized profusely. Some I forgave. My cousin Lisa and I rebuilt our relationship slowly. Others I kept at a distance. I learned that forgiveness wasn't mandatory. I didn't owe reconciliation to people who'd abandoned me when I needed them. Douglas and I closed out the case officially 6 months after the plea deal. He handed me a final accounting of everything. The restitution payments would start once my parents were released from prison. But Douglas was realistic. "You'll probably never collect the full amount," he said. They don't have the assets. Even with payment plans, it'll take years, maybe decades. I know, I said. But that's not why I did this. Why did you do it? I thought about it. Because letting them win would have destroyed me. Not financially, emotionally. I had to prove that truth matters. That you can't just lie and cheat and manipulate people without consequences. Douglas smiled. That's the best reason I've ever heard. 3 years passed. I dated again, something I'd neglected during the years I was saving for the house. I met someone, a teacher named Rachel, who knew nothing about my family drama until I told her months into the relationship. She listened to the whole story, then said, "Your family doesn't define you. You define you." I made new friends. Real friends. I volunteered as a mentor for young engineers, helping them navigate career challenges and office politics. I tried to be the support system I wished I'd had. One day, a letter arrived from the prison. My father's handwriting on the envelope. I stared at it for an hour before opening it. The letter was long. 3 pages of apologies, regrets, explanations. He admitted his jealousy, his gambling addiction, his failures as a father. He detailed how his own insecurities had poisoned everything. He asked for forgiveness, but said he didn't expect it. The letter ended. "I destroyed our family because I couldn't handle your success. That's my burden to carry. I hope someday you can find peace. You deserved a better father." I read it twice. Then I sat down and wrote a response. 1 sentence. "I hope you find peace, but I've moved on." I mailed it and never wrote again. I didn't visit him in prison. I didn't attend his release. When he got out, he sent a few more letters. I returned them, unopened. My mother tried reaching out through relatives. I declined every attempt at contact. Some people thought I was being cruel. My aunt told me that forgiveness would free me. But I'd learned something important. Forgiveness is not mandatory. You're not obligated to maintain relationships with people who tried to destroy you, even if they're family. Eventually, I sold the house. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. It held too many painful memories. Every room reminded me of the battle. The kitchen where I'd received my mother's call. The living room where I'd read the fabricated documents. The garage where I'd discovered the wills. I bought a smaller place in a different city, closer to work, closer to Rachel, closer to the life I was building. A life based not on what I owned, but on who I surrounded myself with. The restitution payments trickled in slowly. $50 a month from my father. $25 from my mother. $15 from Troy. It would take 40 years to collect the full amount. I stopped tracking it. The money didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the lesson I'd learned through all of this. Your worth is not determined by your possessions, your success, or other people's approval. It's determined by your integrity, your resilience, and your willingness to stand up for yourself when everyone else says you should back down. Sometimes the hardest fight is against the people who are supposed to love you most. Parents, siblings, family. We're taught that blood is thicker than water, that family always comes first, that you should forgive and forget. But blood doesn't excuse abuse. Family doesn't justify fraud. And forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. You can acknowledge what happened, process it, learn from it, and move on without maintaining relationships with people who harmed you. You're allowed to protect yourself. You're allowed to set boundaries. You're allowed to say no. Winning doesn't always mean destroying the other side. Sometimes it just means freeing yourself. I'm 37 now. I have a career I'm proud of. A partner who supports me. Friends who value me. A life built on honesty and integrity. My parents are out of prison, living somewhere across the state. Troy occasionally sends texts on holidays that I don't respond to. My extended family has split into factions, some who support me, some who think I should have been more forgiving. I don't lose sleep over it anymore. I learned that you can't control other people's jealousy, resentment, or dysfunction. You can only control how you respond to it. And sometimes the strongest response is simply refusing to engage. My father's journals revealed that he saw my success as his failure. He couldn't separate my achievements from his insecurities. That's his tragedy, not mine. I'm not responsible for his feelings. I'm not responsible for fixing his broken pride. I'm not responsible for making myself smaller so others feel bigger. I'm responsible for living my life with integrity, for treating people with honesty, and for protecting myself from those who won't do the same. That's the lesson I carry forward. That's what I tell the young engineers I mentor. That's what I hope anyone hearing this story understands. You deserve to be surrounded by people who celebrate your success, not resent it. You deserve relationships built on trust, not manipulation. You deserve to protect yourself, even from family. And if you find yourself in a situation like mine, where people you love are trying to destroy you, remember this: fighting back doesn't make you cruel. Standing up for yourself doesn't make you heartless. Protecting your peace doesn't make you selfish. It makes you strong. I live well now. I thrive. And that, in the end, is the greatest victory of all. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who tried to take advantage of you? How did you handle it? What would you have done in my situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories, and share this with someone who might need to hear it. Your support means everything. Thank you for listening, and I hope you find the strength to stand up for yourself, no matter who stands against you. Take care of yourself out there, and remember, your peace matters more than their approval.